if you discover all of a sudden that you're producing what the economists would call an externality, an effect on other people, which is harmful, then you should either stop or pay to clean it up. And that model, which is a model supported by right-wing economists and left-wing economists, yields the conclusion that we ought to simply be taxing the production of carbon, period. It's a simple rule. It's like we're going to tax it. The price that we tax it at, the government can figure out by asking how much does it cost to remove the carbon from the atmosphere. So if it's costing $12 a ton to remove carbon from the atmosphere, that's the tax. And that level would be applied at anybody, anybody producing carbon at some level. Right? If we did that, what people would begin to do is they begin to think, okay, either I can stop producing carbon, drive less, take fewer airplanes, buy solar for my house, or I'll pay the tax, and the tax will be used to remove the carbon I put in the atmosphere. It's just a simple trade-off, right? Just like you produce garbage at your house that I doubt anybody here actually takes their garbage and goes and digs holes and puts it in the holes. You probably pay somebody to do that for you. Same thing with carbon. That's exactly it. Now, the problem is in the political system we've got right now, that solution produces no money for any powerful industry. There's nobody who gets anything from that. So what they do is they create a more complicated system on top, which is this cap and trade system for carbon credits. So they create this huge market. You have a right to produce this much pollution. You can buy and sell that right, and buying and sell that right will enable you to have the incentive to reduce carbon, but if you can't, blah, blah, blah. So from an economic perspective, there's nothing wrong with that in theory. And from a corruption perspective, you can understand exactly why it happens, because now all these people are making huge amounts of money in these markets for trading carbon. But from a practical perspective, it creates all sorts of incentives to game the system. So for example, the great paper recently about how in the refrigerator business, they looked at the amount of money they could make by capturing carbon from the atmosphere, and they realized that all they had to do was to produce the carbon that they were capturing. So they had this literally factory where they were taking the refrigeration stuff that they were doing and producing carbon that they were capturing and then being paid for that transaction, because that's what the market was creating an incentive for them to do. This is, the kind of complex game playing that these complex systems produce, as opposed to the simple system. So I would just wish that we could get some politicians who would argue for the simple, obvious, direct solution, which is to tax carbon at the level necessary to pay for its removal, and immediately we would get enormous response in how people behave and how much carbon is being produced.